Good morning everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar, Lighter Assessment Made Possible with the new classes of assessment for TIPA. Just before starting, I'd like to make sure that everyone can hear me well. If so, can you please write a yes in the chat box? Okay, very good. Thank you. So during this webinar, if you have a question, please raise your hand or write it in the chat box and then we will come back to it afterwards. So I am Aurélie Doucet. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for TIPA at Entrepreneurs, and I'm here today with Valérie Betry, who will be conducting this webinar. So as you know, Valérie is the Project Manager at Tudor in Luxembourg since 2003. And she was part of the research team who developed TIPA. So TIPA is going to be 10 years this year. So it's been some years now that we've been promoting TIPA to the market. And now we have over 100 IT professionals that are certified in TIPA as a TIPA assessor and TIPA lead assessor. And it has also been adopted by 18 organizations who are now offering TIPA assessment in their consulting practice. So as TIPA is expanding, now we've come to a new phase of TIPA. It's the TIPA assessment method. We are adding 3 classes of assessment. So these brand new classes of assessment will now enable organizations to size the effort they are willing to put on an assessment depending on the level of confidence required, the results, and the amount of resource available to perform the assessment. So please, Valérie, go ahead and you can start your webinar.
Okay, hello everybody. So we're going to talk about the new classes of assessment in TIPA, and what we'll do first is try to understand why we thought about adding these classes in TIPA. Then we'll talk about the philosophy behind this idea. Then we'll go into more details for each class, looking at what each class is about and what you can get from each of these classes. Then we'll have a comparison of the different 3 classes so that you understand exactly how they differ. So what was the origin of that new development in TIPA? If you know CMMI, it's been existing for many years, and you have 3 classes of appraisal in the SCAMPI assessment method from CMMI. So this idea of having different ways of conducting assessments depending on what you want to achieve with this assessment and having different levels of confidence has been there for many years. And at the ISO level, you know that TIPA is based on the 15504 ISO standard for process assessment. And at this level also, there was some years ago the introduction of that new idea of having classes of assessment. And at the ISO level, the 15504 standard is now being replaced by a new series of standards. So it's just a revision of the ISO standard and a new number for that series of standards. And in that new 33,000 series, the classes of assessment are precisely described. So we are aligning with TIPA with the new developments that are made at the ISO level. And on top of that, at the TIPA level, we had some requests from the market, from people who have been using TIPA for some years now, to have a lighter method. So there was really this request to have some guidance on how to still have the benefits of TIPA being repetitive, being objective, being a sound assessment method, but having some guidance on how to do it a little bit lighter and easier in some cases if you don't need the full confidence level in that case. So the idea was really to size the effort of the assessment and to have precise guidelines on how to do that. So what we've done is developed the 3 classes, and the purpose is really to have a different type of assessment according to the context that you are in. And so the classes provide you clear indication whenever you want to reduce the scope of an assessment and have a lighter assessment, then you know exactly what you can reduce and what you still need to do as you did previously, because these are aspects that we think are mandatory and you cannot reduce these. So we describe precisely what is achieved and what are the results that you have to produce in each of these classes. So if you are in an internal context, you can use this lighter method. And if you want to have more confidence in the results, we have also added the class 1, which is a stronger method than what we have today. So if you want to do some benchmarking and comparison across organization, you can use this stronger method. So of course the lighter method reduces the cost of the assessment, since you are doing less activities and reducing some of the steps of the assessment method. The introduction of the classes really confirmed also that class 2, which is the middle class and is the current TIPA method that you know today and you are using today. So the positioning of the 3 classes really confirmed that class 2 is really a good trade-off between the resources that you need to spend on the assessment and the quality and the level of confidence you receive as outputs from the assessment. So, and all this work has been done with a need to keep aligned with the ISO standard, so the 15504 ISO standard and the new series 33000. So we have now 3 classes of assessment, so class 1, class 2, and class 3. Class 2, as I said, is the current TIPA class or TIPA assessment method that you know. And so really a class of assessment is defined as a series of activities, of roles, of tools, of steps that you need to organize, and also results that you need to produce. And each class is defined to reach a certain level of rigor in the way you are conducting the assessment. So if we look a little bit at class 2, what is the purpose of that class? So really it's what you have with TIPA today. It's a sound assessment of processes to understand what is their maturity, and it will enable you to do some structured improvements. And with that class you can do some comparison over time of the same organization, or you can do a comparison from one internal unit to the other. So that's the scope of class 2. So that class is really best suited when you want to have a sound rating of process maturity, when you want to have a detailed gap analysis and the SWOT analysis as we have today, when you want to have sound improvement recommendations based on this gap analysis, if you want to assess the capability of one supplier, you can also use that class. And as I said, you can compare over time in the same organization unit, or you can compare different parts of an organization using that class 2. You could also use the class 2, TIPA class 2, to do some organizational maturity. So internally, so not in with the idea of publishing the results, but if you want to have an idea of where is your organization overall, you could use TIPA Class 2. You could also do some benchmarking with other assessed organization using Class 2. And you can display the results of your assessments within your organization. Class 2 is not meant to publish really publicly your results. What Class 2 is not really recommended for is to do some comparison across different organizations. To do that, you need to have more a higher level of confidence in the results, and for that you need to have Class 1. And Class 2 is not recommended for a public display of your assessment results. So this is about Class 2. What would be the benefits of using Class 2? It's really a good trade-off between the cost of the assessment and the results that you get. You have a good level of confidence. You focus on some inputs and outputs of the process, but you not review them really in depth and in a systematic way. So it's limited to specific cases, and it's compliant with 15504. The outputs that you would get from a Class 2 assessment, you have a clear and detailed findings for each of the base practice and generic practice that you have assessed. You have a rating for each of these base practice and generic practice. You have the SWOT analysis. You have the improvement recommendations as you have today. As we said, you have a limited review of process inputs and outputs. It's not systematic. You have also the SWOT analysis across processes. So if you have different processes within one assessment project, you would have that cross-analysis. So overall in the organization, across all the processes, you can find SWOTs, and you can also have recommendations that are across these processes. You've got the process profile, of course, and the diagram that shows the maturity level that has been achieved by the different processes. And at the end, what is also new in TIPA now is that you can issue an assessment certificate. So the lead assessor of the assessment project would be able to have a certificate with the TIPA logo and explaining what that an assessment has been done, and sorry, and the different processes that have been assessed and the level that has been achieved. So this is Class 2. So Class 2 is really what you know today as the TIPA assessment method. So what is different in Class 1? Class 1 is the most complex and the most achieved class of assessment. So this method is really meant when you want to do some organizational maturity, or when you want to do some comparison across organizations, then you are going to have really trustworthy results. So it's really for these purposes that you would use Class 1. So organizational maturity, comparison across different organizations. Also, if you want to select different suppliers or one suppliers from different potential suppliers, you could use Class 1 to really compare the different possibilities and choose the best one. And so at the end, Class 1 is really the class you want to use if you want to publicly display the assessment results. So Class 1 is not really recommended if you want to do a quick rating or really light definition of some improvement recommendations. So it's really a thorough method. What you get from class 1 is really an exhaustive assessment method. You do, as in class 2, you do a sound assessment of the process maturity, but on top of that, you have really a thorough review of all the inputs and outputs of the process. So you get some objective comparisons of the assessment results, and of course it's also compliant with 15504. So really what you have in class 1 is the same as in class 2. So all the outputs that are in TIPA today, you get also in class 1. But on top of that, you have a sound review and systematic review of all the process inputs and outputs, so that you not only base your assessment on the interview results or interview discussions that you have with the people, but you also based your ratings on the systematic review of the tools, the inputs, the documents that are used and produced by the process. So this is basically what is quite different in class 1. Okay, so now we move to class 3. In class 3, what we want to achieve is to have a quick overview of the process maturity so that you can do some monitoring of the process implementation or some monitoring of the improvement of the process. So class 3 is really there to do a quick rating. You have a light strengths and weakness analysis, so you don't have the opportunity and the threat in that case. It's really there to monitor.
Valérie, sorry.
And,
sorry, I think we have a question from Satish. He's raising his hand, so I'm going to unmute.
Yep.
Here you go.
Hello?
Satish, I haven't unmuted you now, so you can ask your question. No? Okay. Okay. Well, maybe you can write your question and then we can come back to it after. Okay. Sorry, Valérie. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. So what you get in TIPA Class 3, as you have less confidence in the results, and we'll have a table just in a few slides explaining what you do and what you don't do in Class 3, you'll understand that you will have less confidence in the results that you get from the assessments. So in that case, what you are able to produce is just improvement suggestions. And this is a light definition of some suggestions to improve the process, but it's not as sound as when you do a class 2, because you interview less people and you look at less information on the process, so you get less overall less confidence in the ratings that you give, and so your improvement suggestions are not that thorough than in a class 2. So class 3 is not recommended if you want to have sound recommendations, and it will not allow you to really produce a detailed improvement plan. We do not recommend to use class 3 if you want to do comparison of the same organizational unit over time or comparison across different organizations. We do not recommend to display the results of the assessment if you are using class 3 outside of that organizational unit. And so it's also not the best class if you want to do some organizational maturity. And we do not recommend to use class 3 if you want to assess maturity level 4 and 5. So class 3 should be limited to level 1 to 3. Okay, so what do I get if I do a class 3 assessment? Really what the benefits are, you have less paperwork. We have tried to look at all the different documents that you need to produce in class 2 and look at what the one that could be that are not really necessary if you want to do a quick assessment. So you have simplified templates and tools. You have some activities that you do not do, or some that are simplified, and so the outputs are also simplified. So at the end, you need less resources on the assessment team side, and you have also less resources and less time needed from the customer side. So at the end, the class 3 it's faster and it's less costly than a traditional TIPA assessment, but still it remains compliant with the 15504 requirements. So what you get at the end of a class 3 is the rating of each base practice, and you have the strengths and weaknesses for each process. You have light definition of improvement suggestions. You have the process profile and the diagram showing the maturity, but you don't get you know, the opportunities and threats. You don't get the review of inputs and outputs of the process. You don't get the across processes SWOT analyses or the across processes improvement suggestions. So it's more a view on each process than something that you consolidate overall all the processes that have been assessed. But at the end, you still get that assessment certificate that we can now issue for each assessment. Okay, so if we look at this table to understand exactly what are the commonalities or the differences between the three classes. So the management of the assessment project still has to be done by one certified TIPA lead assessor. So you need that in any of the class. But what is quite different is the number of assessors that you need when you assess one process. So for each process in class 1 and in class 2, you need to have 2 assessors. Of course, one of these assessors can also be the lead assessor conducting the project or managing the project. But you need to have 2 assessors to do each interview of that process. In TIPA Class 3, what you have is you are allowed to only have 1 assessor. So that really reduces the cost and the time spent on the assessment. And of course, in Class 3, that a single assessor per process can also be the lead assessor. So you can have one person, one lead assessor team on the project assessing all the processes. One thing that is also different is the level of independence of the assessment team. That's something that has been defined more precisely in the new 33,000 standard coming from the ISO. So in Class 1, you need to make sure that the assessment team is fully independent from the people that are being assessed. In Class 2, you just need to make sure that there's a separation of responsibility between the assessment team and the people being assessed. And in Class 3, there are no requirements. So you could do an assessment within your own unit. And so the assessor could be part of one small unit or team and do the assessment. The next topic is the number of interviews that you need to do per process. So in Class 2 today, we recommend to have three interviews. In Class 1, to have more confidence in the results and to have, you know, a bigger basis for comparison, you need to have at least 4 interviews per process. And in Class 3, you only need to have 2 interviews. So that's really a big difference. So again, it makes the the project more costly if you do a Class 1 assessment, and if it reduces the cost in Class 3. But again, you understand that if you have only 2 interviews, you get less results and you have less confidence when you are doing, the consolidation and the rating of the process. So it's really a trade-off. The next topic is the rating of the interviews. In Class 1 and in Class 2, what you are required is to to do the rating for each interview, and then only you rate the process based on the rating of the different interviews. You consolidate. In Class 3, you are allowed to do a single rating. So you might have 2 interviews for one process, and you don't do the single interview rating. You just move to the next level, which again gains time, so you can rate only the process overall based on the information you got from the 2 interviews. In Class 1, you need to have 2 sources of evidence. So this means that you can do some interviews and get some information about the process coming from these interviews, but you also need to review documents and tools and supporting databases and so on. So you need to have these 2 sources of information to conclude on the process rating. In Class 2, you are required only to have 1 source, and that would be the interviews, but then in some cases you are required to have a second source of information. So if you are not confident in the rating that you get only from the information gathered during the interviews, you are required to look at some documents, look at some supporting tools and so on, to make sure that you understood right what is the current usage or the current implementation of the process. In Class 3, you only have to have 1 source of information, and that is the interviews. Okay, so at the end what you get is the level of rigor that is asked from the assessment process is quite high in Class 1 and in Class 2, and it's a little bit lower in Class 3. The level of confidence that you get on the end of the assessment is bigger in Class 1, is a little bit less in Class 2 because you have less interviews and because you have less review of the inputs and outputs. And again in Class 3 you have a lower level of confidence because again you have less interviews and only 1 source of information. The repeatability of the process is really good in Class 1 and in Class 2, and it's lower in Class 3. As you know, you're interviewing only 2 people, so it might be that you got some view on the process coming from these 2 people, but if in 1 year after some improvement actions you go and ask 2 other people and do again a Class 3 assessment, you are not sure that the results you would get are really due to the fact that there were some improvements, but they are maybe just due to the fact that the people are not the same and the context is not the same. So repeatability is not that high in Class 3. The cost, of course, you can understand. If you are more interviews, then it costs more money. You spend more time doing the ratings, doing the consolidation. And in Class 3, if you have less interview, if you have only 1 assessor, if you do not spend time on looking at opportunities and strengths and threats, if you don't look at cross processes, SWOTs, if you don't look at a detailed improvement plan, then you spend less time and money. And in all cases, you've got the publication of the results. If we look at the different outputs that are coming from the different classes, so you need to understand that these are the minimum required outputs for each class. There's nothing that prevents you to do a class 3 and agree with your client that they are willing to put a little more resources because they want to have additional results or outputs from the assessment. So the check marks that you have on this table are the ones that are mandatory to be compliant with class 1, class 2, or class 3. But if in each class, if you want to have additional outputs, you can do that. So I'm not going to go into all the detailed in that table, but you can notice that you have a sound review of the process inputs and outputs only in class 1. You have a limited review of these inputs and outputs in class 2, and you don't have anything in class 3. What you can also see is that the detailed findings described for each best practice and generic practice are not tracked in class 3. So what you do is you do your interviews, you end up with a rating for best practice 2 for incident management, for example, and yet the results that you put in the assessment report is only, okay, best practice 2 for incident management is rated at as largely, and that's it. You don't write down all the details of what you have found. So you have less information in the assessment report. And in class 3, you don't have to do the rating for each generic practice. You can, okay, during the interview, you just ask questions about each generic practice, but you don't need to rate each of them at the end. You just look at the information that you have found and you rate the process attribute only. So these are basically the most important differences in the different classes. So now if we want to focus on what is particular in class 3, we'll look at what is different, we'll look at what remains the same, we'll look at the tasks that are adapted, some tools that are specific, and at the end we'll have a short discussion about how to select the most appropriate class. So what is the philosophy behind class 3? You've understood the goal was to reduce the time and cost of the assessment project, and we wanted to focus on having quick results to understand what is the status of the process. So the workload of the assessment project has been adapted. You have less work to be done in that case. You have only one assessor instead of 2 per process, and you have only 2 interviews per process. As you understand, the SWOT analysis is reduced to strengths and weaknesses. So your improvement suggestions are less thorough than in the 2 other classes. You don't recommend any improvement plan. The assessment is limited to maturity levels 1, 2, and 3. The scope of the assessment scope agreement, the document itself, is reduced, it's lighter, and the assessment report is also a reduced document. You do not review the process inputs and outputs. You are not doing the feedback forms and trying to gather lessons learned. So the closure of the project is really quicker. You don't do the overall SWOTs and recommendation, and so overall you have a lower confidence, but still a quick view on where the process is and for a lower cost. So these are the differences, or what is different from the other classes and different from what you do in TIPA today. What still remains in class 3 is the NPLF rating scale. So you still use the not partially, largely, fully rating scale to do your assessment. The maturity scale with the different level is also there. We don't change that. The process assessment model and the questionnaires that are used today in TIPA stay the same. So you don't reduce the questions and you don't change the way you conduct interviews. The consolidation rules are the same. Even if you have less interviews, you could still rate each interview and consolidate them together. And the consolidation rules going from the base practice ratings to the attribute ratings, and going from the attribute ratings to the level determination, these stays exactly the same. You still need to have one lead assessor, and the team is stays the same. So you need to have one coordinator, you need to have one sponsor. You might have only one lead assessor and who is doing also the assessor. What we change in class 3 is the observers. We consider that if you want to do a quick assessment, you are not going to introduce some observers in the interviews and in your project. The phases of the method are the same, and yeah, I think that's it. I've covered. So most of the the basic bricks of the assessment method in TIPA are the same in class 3. What is different is at a lower level, so some tasks are not required any longer. So adapting the feedback form as you are not using it, defining the pairs of assessor, doing the follow-up on the document collection, reviewing the documents, and so on. So these are the different tasks that are not required anymore. And there are some tasks that are simplified due to the fact that you are not doing the activities exactly the same. Some tasks, for example, presenting the process assessment approach to the sponsor and the team, we have reduced that to a minimum, or defining the scope of the process, or estimating the workload. These tasks have been reviewed and specified if you are in a class 3 assessment. So these, for each phase, in fact, you have the list of the different tasks that have been changed. So as you have usually in a class 3 assessment, you might have only one assessor. There are several tasks that are not necessary because you don't need to consolidate the information, to brief the assessment team, to spend some time agreeing within the assessment team. So that's for the tasks that have been modified or adapted for a class 3 assessment. The toolbox is also a little bit adapted. So there are some tools that are not useful when you are doing a class 3 assessment. So as we've said, you do not do the document collection, you do not use the feedback forms, you're not doing some administrative stuff at the end of the project. So the deliverables receipt form is not used, and you're not doing the project closure report. So these are the tools you are not using. Some other tools stay the same, so all the ones that you see in black on the screen you keep and you use exactly as you used to. Some tools that you see in orange have a specific version for class 3. So for example, the workload estimation tool, so you have a new version of the tool when you are in class 3, as you are not using the same, you're not doing the same steps, and the constraints are not the same when you're doing a class 3 assessment. The workload estimation tool has been adapted. The cheese has also been adapted. So if you are in class 3, you see that with all the tasks that you do not need to do, or all the tasks that you need to adapt in that case. As we've said, the assessment scope agreement, the kickoff presentation, the assessment report, and the assessment results presentation have been simplified in the case of class 3. So we'll have a look at some of the tools and see what's different. So for the workload estimation tool, you have some vice factors, some formulas, some standard figures that are included in the tool that have been reduced for class 3. If we have a look at a comparison of the workload for a class 2 versus a class 3 assessment, so if, for example, you are assessing 4 processes, and for each of them you still want to keep 3 interviews, so you're doing a class 3 a little bit more than what is required in class 3, but it's just to give you you will need 3 days in class 2 and only 1 in class 3. For the preparation phase, you will need a little bit more in class 2. For the assessment phase, that's really where you gain time, having 8 days in class 2 and only 3 days and a half in class 3. For the analysis phase, you also gain a lot of time, having less assessors and having less activities. The SWOTs are not complete, and the overall analysis is not done. So you really reduce time. And the results presentation phase is also a little bit reduced in class 3, as the assessment report and the presentation of the results are simplified, so you gain time. So at the end, you would have a 20-day assessment in class 2 and only a 9-day assessment in class 3. So that's if you keep the same number of processes, the same number of interviews. If you go for the full class 3 setup, let's say, and only interview 2 people in class 3, you could reduce the total number of days to 7.5. And what you also need to understand is that if you're doing a class 3 assessment, the workload for the client is also reduced because you have less interviews and you have maybe less time spent at the beginning of the assessment, understanding the context and reviewing at the end the assessment report and so on. So it would be of 7.5 days in class 2 and only 6 days of investment coming from the client in class 3. So these give you an example of a comparison. So we've talked about the assessment scope agreement, which is different. So you remember, in a normal TIPA assessment, you have a document, textual description of the scope of the assessment. In class 3, you can use this tabular presentation. You have less details. It's only bullet points that you have in that document. So it's done really more quickly. The assessment kickoff presentation is so it's limited. We consider that in a class 2 you give less background and less information to the people before you interview them. So there's a specific presentation with less details that are discussed with the people who are going to be interviewed. The assessment report, as we said, it's again a tabular presentation. You have less details. So, for example, for the base practices, you have only such a table with the number of the base practice, the description, and just the rating. So you don't have the paragraph explaining what was the finding that you had and what is the situation. So you have less explanations and yeah, basically tabular format. The assessment results presentation, so the PowerPoint you're using at the end is also a little bit adapted, so you have less detail on the results, and you could imagine that you are not writing the assessment report at all, and you're only putting all the results in the assessment result presentation. So in that case, you need just to include a few information on the scope of the process and the project. As we said, the checklist has been adapted. So as you see, the checklist for Class 3, you have the different tasks that you need to pay attention to because they are different from a Class 2 or Class 1, and the tasks that you do not, you are not required to do any longer. Okay, so now that we've looked at the different classes and we've looked in more detail at Class 3, you need to understand how you could select the appropriate class. So it's really part of the role of the lead assessor to explain that new concept in TIPA. And so if you, in the first discussion that you have with the sponsor of the assessment project, you need to explain what are the different classes and what you can get from each class, what are the benefits, but also what are the drawbacks of, or the the things that you would not get from each of the class. So, and really doing that, you can look at so the different use cases. So if you want to do some benchmarking, worldwide, comparing your organization to other organizations in the same domain, then a Class 1 is more appropriate. Or if you want to do a quick assessment looking at where your process is today, then you can use Class 3. So the different use cases that you have will help you define which class is the best. Of course, so the overall purpose of the assessment will help you also define the most appropriate class. Also, the level of exposure, so the publicity that you want to do with your the results of your assessments. If you want to display on your public website, if you want to show them to your parent company, if you want to only display them in your small unit, that would also define whether you need a Class 1 or Class 2 or Class 3. As we've seen, the list of outputs that you get from the assessment is different from one class to the other. So looking at and discussing of what your clients really is expecting from the assessment will help you define which is the most appropriate class. And remember the characteristics and for example, the level of rigor, the repeatability of the level of independence that you want from your assessment team. These could be criteria that you could use to define the most appropriate class. Okay, so we've covered most of the topics that I wanted to discuss with you today. So looking at why we have introduced this new notion of classes of assessment, what are the different classes, when you use one or when you use the other, what are the benefits, what are the different differences that you have in class 3, what are the different activities, the activities that you do not do, or the activities that you do differently in class 3, also the different tools that have been adapted. So what would be the next steps for you? So there's a fact sheet on the TIPA classes. So basically, everything that I've explained today is written on paper and explained in details. There's also a white paper explaining in detail these classes of assessments. What you have, if you have a TIPA member, you can have access to a specific guide for TIPA Class 3. So it will give you all the explanation of the different tools, of the different steps, of the different tasks that you do or do not do when you are doing a TIPA Class 3. And also what you get if you are a TIPA member is the updated TIPA Toolbox with the new tools adapted for Class 3. The TIPA Lead Assessor training has been updated, so there's now a new module on the classes of assessment that will be delivered next month now. And you can start using TIPA and using the different classes with all this information and the new toolbox. And really, we would appreciate if you can give us any feedback. So the email is there, tipa@tudor.lu. So if you can give you any feedback, give us any feedback on the way the classes are explained, or the new tools, or the method itself, or anything, that would really be great. So now I'm finished with my presentation. So if you have any questions, any more information that you need, please feel free.
Yes, thank you very much, Valérie. We just received a question here. Is the ISO 15504 is going to be updated to ISO 33000? Yeah,
so the standard is, so you know, there's a revision cycle for all the ISO standard. And so the 15504 with its different parts, so part 1, 2, 3, up to 8, I think, has been revised, or is being revised for some months or year now. And so each part of the ISO 15504 is going to become one standard in the 33,000 series. So the way they are numbering the standards at ISO now has changed a little bit. So instead of having 15504-1-2-3, they will have the 33001, 33002, and so on. And so this currently is under final revision at the ISO level. So the new standard is supposed to be published maybe by the end of this year or early next year.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? No? So this presentation has been recorded, so we will send it to you, and also in PDF as well, so you can review it whenever you want to. And also we've updated the TIPA website with this, with all the information about the classes of assessment, and also the white paper and the fact sheets that Valérie was just referring just before. So you can have access to it.
Okay, so if you don't have any more questions, we really thank you for your attention. And again, feel free to contact us if you have any questions or remarks or feedback.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Valérie, for presenting, and yes, we hope to speak to you soon. Thank you very much all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.